Designated Survivor Season 2, Episode 6, Two Ships. This was definitely a good episode. Definitely an emotional ending for sure. Not at all what I was expecting, where this guy ultimately ends up sacrificing himself, but a really good episode. It starts off with the ship in the water. They end up being rammed, which we find out later on. At first it was just, this crazy storm just naturally, sent some ships off course. They end up running into each other. Again. You have, giant waves. It's the middle of the night. Very difficult to see. And so it's just this seemingly simple accident. We want to get our people, the ship, the Verona as they were calling it, it's damaged. It's starting to sink slowly. They have to close off locations. It's like, all right, well, we're taking on some water, but we have some time. We have some food. We're just kind of waiting to get rescued. That's all there is to it. And it's like, okay, well, simple mission. We were going from this location to that location. It had nothing to do with, no ill will, nothing like that. It wasn't hostile. There was no spying. It was just one location to the other. Simply put, the storm is the main reason that the ship was even off course. And it's like, well, this was just a mistake. We know that there are sanctions. We know that this might seem bad, but all we want to do is get our people and get our ship, take it right out of there. And instead they go through this insane battle where it's like, okay, well, the U.S. sent this ship in to spy on us. There's like a whole, that seems to be like the theme of the series at this point, where either something is just completely lied about or it's taken out of context and it's like, okay, well, this thing happened, but it happened because the U.S. did this and they were trying to spy on our country and stuff like that. And it's like, all right, well, all we can do is say the simple thing where it's like, well, it was just a storm and that's why that happened. But it seems more likely, with there being sanctions and things that have been there for years now, it makes people think a certain way. So they have to kind of go through it in different aspects and at least attempt to go through it in different aspects and say like, all right, well, we want to do this the political way. We have these sanctions, and of course we kind of broke sanctions that were made by our own country, things like that, by traveling into your country and agreements that have been made. But it's a simple mistake. All you need to let us do is get our people. But, that was kind of not how things were playing out. And as, kind of time goes on, it's found out that this random, just garbage ship that was just going through the water actually turned into the ship, and it was all done on purpose. And I thought that was a very interesting change. And typically, when that sort of thing happens where they find out that the person was lying about something, or, Kirkman decides to get into kind of angry mode where he's like, oh, I found out how you guys are lying to us or tricking us, now I'm going to be super pissed off and I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen. It didn't really play out that way. In a sense it did, because ultimately, the guy was like, we're still not going to let you do that, and he was kind of holding up the lie that they had. And it was like, all right, well, since the, negotiations failed, we're going to go get our people. That plain and simple. And if they happen to fight back, then we will destroy every ship that they have. And Kirkman was, he was in his angry mode. It's like he goes through, he finds out the trick, and then he gets super pissed off, and then he goes to, his next plan. So, they go through, the blockade, everything was all said and done, and then we find out that the captain that Kirkman was talking to throughout the episode, the man who, he became the captain after the actual captain died, he decided to stay on the ship, and it was because he realized why the ship, the Verona, was so incredibly important. And it was like, okay, well, I need to be here in order to, sink the ship and make sure that the scuttle sequence actually, activates, because they will, of course, take the vessel and everything. So I need to make sure that this doesn't happen, because they'll get this insanely important information that's vital, or at least secret, within our country. So, Kirkman clears everyone out of the room, and he wants to have this conversation with him, ask him, about his life and where he's from, if he has a girlfriend, ask him about his parents. And it's like, he's giving him, the good, president speech. And it's like, you have so much to look forward to. There are things that you can't even imagine. Like, this is not where your story ends. And even though that's, in most stories, he would say, okay, I trust you, because he even says you have to trust me that we will handle this. And you need to kind of keep living your life. Even with all of that, he decides to stay on that ship. And I was like, wow, that's not something you see very often. Typically, the main character gives that great heroic speech, and then the other person's like, you're right, and then they don't die, or whatever good thing is supposed to happen does happen. And this was not one of those cases, which I always appreciate, because even though it's cliche, and it's definitely nicer to have the characters live, even if they're random characters that are literally only in one episode, it's still entertaining to watch when it doesn't go that way, when it's not the cliche route of the nice bow, nice tied up little happy ending. And he ultimately sacrificed his life in order to protect this vital information, that was the property of the United States. So I really enjoyed that. I was like, it's sad, but it was definitely a good way to end that story. It was definitely unique. That was, one of the emotional elements of this episode, because we do have 3 stories. The second being Emily dealing with her father, and that's already started off emotional, where it was like, she hadn't seen her father in 23 years, and then he drops the picture, which really makes him a douchebag, because we find out the truth at the end of the episode. And I kind of thought that anyway, when he did that, I was like, he had like the super emotional moment where it's like, I carried this around for 23 years, but now that I see you, I know I don't need the picture anymore, and he leaves. And I was like, well, it's kind of a douchebag thing, but it was like, if he's, genuinely upset that his daughter doesn't want to see him after 23 years, and he's finally doing something to try to get back into her life, it's like, okay, I'll let you slide on like the little, the last second super emotional attachment moment. It's like, okay, I'll let that slide. And through most of the episode, it did seem that way, where he's just kind of going around, he's talking with people, it's like, no big deal, I'll see you later and stuff. And then it gets to him meeting the president. And when he first asked, I was like, okay, he might just really want to meet the president. And I was like, it can't be that simple. And then ultimately it comes down to, he wants a picture with the president where they show the little corkscrew thing where, he hits the button and it pops the corkscrew straight out. And it was just like, wow, that's what he decided to do. What a dick. So that was like his whole big thing after 23 years. That was like his big triumph, to come back into his daughter's life. It was kind of just, my investors would really love a picture of the president somewhere near, our little corkscrew, automatic corkscrew. And it's just like, wow, that sucks. And so, they kind of cut from that moment to kind of later in the episode, at the end of the night. And Emily's, she's kind of doing her thing, and everyone kind of goes past. So we see Aaron, and he just gives her like the nod, and just does his sort of nonchalant thing. Leo actually comes in and gives her a drink. He says nothing, which I thought was actually really great, where he just comes in, he leaves her something. It's like, okay, I'm out. And it's, he's not as great as he is with words. He's not that great when it comes to just the actual personal stuff. It's just when it comes to work. And then Seth comes in, and I was wondering, because I thought they were kind of building this up a little bit over the past couple episodes, and he comes in and he brings her, a bunch of food and stuff, and then he gives her a really great speech about her being, as useful as bread and being great and stuff like that. And ultimately, Emily does end up kissing Seth, and I was like, okay, they're definitely doing that. So I like that, because they did seem like it was very, very minimal, and that's kind of what I liked about it. Because I was like, okay, they're saying stuff where, they're just genuinely being nice to each other, but they had the thing where, in the first episode, Emily was being like super nice to Seth, and she was saying all this stuff about like them needing you. And I think there was a line in there where she was like, I need you, or something like that. She was like, or we need you, that typical thing that people do in TV shows, because I don't think people do that in real life, where it's like, I need you, I mean, we need you. I don't know, I've never had that happen or ever heard a real story like that, but they always do it in TV where they say I instead of we. And I feel like they did that in the premiere with them, where she was saying that to him, and I was like, that seems, it was a bit more personal than just, hey, you're a great asset to the team. It seemed like a more personal connection. And so they were just, tiny little things like that. And I was, in the first episode, and then it would be little stuff where they're just hanging out and making jokes with each other. And I was like, okay, this is easily could just be friendship, but it could also, if they want to, they can make it something more, as far as the writers, I mean. And so they decided to actually do that by the end of this episode where they kiss. And I was like, cool. I felt like that was a legitimate progression. It's not like some shows where it's just like, it just kicks in out of nowhere. I like that. I thought that was pretty cool. They, oddly enough, with that being like the natural progression, this show does have like the super fast one, which was Hannah with the other dude. I can't remember his name, but I do remember that dude called him Mr. Bean, which made me laugh. But of course the British agent. So they don't really do anything with their relationship in this episode. If anything, they kind of cut it off, because Hannah was just like, what helps is not talking about it, because she kind of letting it go, like that was their moment. And then it kind of passed, and it was like, all right, we're kind of moving on with our case, and that's all there is to it. So I thought that was interesting. I was like, all right, that was definitely that sort of, it wasn't an actual relationship. Even if they did go somewhere, or if they decide to go somewhere, I assume it's just going to be like a fling sort of deal. It won't be like a legitimate relationship, like Seth and Emily. But I was like, okay, they're kind of blocking that off, but they're definitely going forward with this case, and it was definitely interesting. They go through, it's like, all right, we have this woman who is totally now our new target because we found out that she's the one that kind of in control and her husband was kind of just the face. We assumed it was him, we were wrong, so we're going after her. They get her on all these different charges and everything, and then they find out that the woman they were talking to before, who worked with the ambassador, she's been kidnapped. So she's been kidnapped and they have to find a way to rescue her. They're able to stop for a little bit of time, saying like, we need proof that she's actually alive for as far as the extradition of this guy to Malaysia, I believe it was. So they get the proof there, and she's able to actually put in a code for Bells. It was like Bells Road or whatever. So they're able to fortunately rescue her. They take out the other people, and then they track the phone back to her hotel. And it's like, all right, well, this phone is to her hotel. Once we find that phone, we'll get you for all the charges, the death of this person, the kidnapping of this person, all the different lies that you've told us. And then this crazy little reveal comes out at the end where it's like, yeah, it turns out I didn't kill her because I actually needed her. Like, I utilized her because that allowed for me to actually do a bunch of stuff behind the scenes, but my husband was kind of dumb and kind of got information put out there a little too fast and, made it a bit more public. So that twist kind of throws things off at the end where it's like, okay, well, if she, if this official story now is like she has to reveal I didn't kill this person because I literally needed this person to help me do what I was already doing, then it switches to like, okay, well, what in the world do we do now? And unfortunately, that leads to the new crazy lead that they have, which is that the former president, currently the Secretary Moss, he was at the woman's house. I believe her last name was Thorin. And they have this amazingly perfect shot of a random camera that's in the street. I don't know why it was aiming directly down the hallway, but for whatever reason, TV reasons, it was. So it's aiming directly down this hallway. And we see this person. I actually thought it was the vice president, and they're like, it's like a side profile through a glazed window. And I was like, okay, they won't have any clues, or it'll come up as someone else. And I was like, that kind of looks like the former president. And I was like, it's not going to be him, though. I just assumed. I was like, that looks like him. I was like, this is probably just an older guy who happens to have white hair. But it comes up, and it's like, we have a match, and it's like, oh, no, it's definitely the former president, and that is insanely suspicious. So he's involved in something crazy, and he may have been the one that planted the phone. Maybe not. He might be involved with, whoever was the one that had done it. So that's very interesting. I can't wait to see how they go through this explanation as to what in the world he's been doing. Seeing him come back, I was like, oh, it's cool that he's still in the show even. And then it's like, oh, he's definitely going to be relevant now, because before it was like, oh, okay, he kind of helped Kirkman out. He's the former president. That's a big boost for ratings and all that. And that was kind of why they sort of brought him in, and he was willing to help Kirkman out. And it was like, okay, that's cool to see him come back, and he's going through the process a little bit with the investigation, kind of figuring out where they are. And that was definitely interesting, getting to that ending point. I was just like, oh, that's not what I thought was going to happen. So, crazy mystery. It could be nothing. He could have just been sleeping with that woman. That could legitimately be the answer, is that he's not actually a bad guy. They just happen to have like this relationship, and he kind of had to sneak over because it's the dude who works for the president and this woman who's like an ambassador. Maybe they technically shouldn't be together, that sort of thing, or legally speaking, they shouldn't be together. So it could be as simple as that, but we just have to wait and see how that's going to play out. And then, of course, and I think I mentioned this in my last review, the stuff going on with Alex's mom did not go away, and it got worse. It got worse, and it seems like it's going to continue to get worse in the next episode, because we find out that basically what Alex had done, as far as saying, my mom never had contact with this guy, or hasn't for 20-something years, is, I forgot what she said. It was like, absolute misrepresentation or something like that. It was a term I wasn't familiar with, but basically it sounded like something was like, oh, it's not exactly perjury because you didn't know, but that still counts as something really, really bad, and then that may or may not kind of snowball into becoming obstruction. So now we have not only the initial lie of encountering this guy and having this old deal, and it's the craziest thing. It's like all of this is coming up because it's like, this is something that, even with the statute of limitations being over, somehow it's still a big freaking deal. And it's like, that sucks. Like, it's supposed to just be all said and done, statute of limitations, and then it's just like these constant secrets, or this tiny revelation where it's just like, I was thinking when they had that scene when she was like, I forgot, and he showed up like 6 months ago, we drank a little bit of wine, and then he was he was gone, and that was it. The first thing I kind of thought was, man, I wish he just didn't tell her that. Like, if no one knew, everyone would have assumed it was true. But she like wouldn't sign the statement because she remembered that moment where they were together for like a couple of minutes drinking wine. I thought she was gonna say they had sex because it was like, why is this dude randomly bringing over wine and stuff? I was like, that's definitely a personal thing. But now it's like almost not even worth having shared it. Like it would have been one thing if they had ended up having sex and it was like, okay, at least there was some significance to it. But then it's like, crap, now it's just been revealed they had some alcohol for like a couple of minutes and he left because somebody died and they were like, old moments, to a friend, whatever. It's like, wow, that almost wasn't even worth telling anybody the truth about. Granted, I know that's illegal, but still, sometimes you just gotta keep things close to the vest. But yeah, I was like, wow, all right, well, that's another layer to that, and they can't, now that that's officially out there, that she's revealed, like, I won't sign this because I remember this, and technically that makes what my daughter said not true. It's like, all right, well, where do we go from here? Because she didn't sign it saying, yes, this is what happened, and if she won't sign it, they will ask questions like, well, why won't you sign it if that's true? And then she'll just have to say that it's not true in a weird roundabout way. It's like she didn't lie, but the misrepresentation. So that's just constant up and down disaster. Like it's just so crazy watching that little storyline. Like, it was so small in this episode too. It was like a couple of scenes, and it was just like, man, this is getting worse and worse. Like this tiny started with the file of something that the statute of limitations is up on, and yet it's still a huge deal. And that's just crazy to me. But enjoying the storyline. I am excited to see where that goes. Next episode should be very entertaining with the family officially kind of dealing with all these issues. Alex being framed. Well, she says like everyone's being framed, but I assume it's her and her mother, and then obviously Kirkman being the president and tied to that. Their son gets attacked, so we will actually see the son make a return in the next episode as well. But I'm looking forward to where we're headed. We have two pretty interesting investigations going on. One with the crazy lead to Secretary Moss, and now whatever the world's going to happen with Alex's mom, because that's just constantly becoming a bigger and bigger issue. But I'm looking forward to both of those. Really enjoyed this episode, of course. We'd love to know what you guys thought about it, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, least favorite parts about it. And I didn't think I'd be asking this, but I would love to know where you guys think things are headed for Alex and her mother, because now with Alex having defended her in the last episode, even if it was like for a little bit, she's even more wrapped up in this entire situation. So I would love to know your theories on how that whole situation is going to play out and what will go right, what will go wrong. And of course, I want to know just what you guys thought about this episode in general. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.